What's up, guys? It's ALLDAYANTHONY, and it is a beautiful day for a Grom ride. So I just picked up the Grom from my local moto shop, and I had a couple things done to make sure that it's running better than ever. So first things first is I had the valve clearance done. So this is something that I hadn't done since I got the bike, and if you guys don't remember, I bought this bike used with a little over 1,000 miles on it, and since then the only really maintenance I've done has been oil changes, and I did a couple spinner cleanings. So a valve clearance was definitely due since I've put about 4,000 miles on this bike. So I took it in for that, but that wasn't the only thing that was done apparently. The dealership called me and told me that my fuel pump was swollen and pretty much on the verge of seizing. And that was a little concerning. I didn't really know what to think at first. I thought they were messing with me, and then I did a quick Google search to find out that there was a recall done on the fuel pumps of the 2014 and 2015 Grom. So basically what happens is that these fuel pumps get swollen, probably due to heat or probably just due to normal use. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. And then they essentially seize up, causing the bike to stall. And that could be a pretty bad situation, depending if you're at speed or not, or if you don't have the clutch pulled in. So it could definitely cause some damage. So needless to say, I was pretty happy that I had that done. Now, I thought this would transition into a good topic for people that are looking to buy a Grom, or maybe people that own a Grom that aren't aware of repair costs or potential costs that they could possibly have. So that's kind of what I want to talk about in this video. So as you guys know, I have had the Grom now for, gosh, coming up on 2 years here, and I think it'll be 2 years in July, and you guys can bet that I will definitely be doing a full 2-year review with the Grom. But in the meantime, I want to talk about cost of repairs and maintenance and things like that. Let's just preface this by saying that this is a 125cc Honda. If you know bikes, or if you don't know a lot about motorcycles, let me just explain that 125cc Honda, this is something that they've been doing for so many years. These bikes, or these engines, will pretty much outlive the cockroaches for the most part. I mean, these things are really durable and they can really take a beating. Now, with that said, it's not all fun and games. I mean, there is some things you have to do to keep these things going, essentially. So to give you guys a rundown of this, this is a fuel-injected 125cc with a single cylinder. What that means is that this bike is actually air-cooled. There's no radiator, there's no coolant, there's nothing like that. So it relies purely on air to stay cool. So if I wasn't moving right now to keep this engine cool, if I was sitting still, this bike's just going to keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, the lifeblood of the 125cc engine is oil. That's the most important part of the Grom. That's what keeps things lubricated, and that's what keeps things essentially cool as well. So oil is extremely important, and that's something that I always tell people with a Grom. Oil is, changing oil consistently or regularly is very cheap insurance to ensure that this bike is going to last a long period of time. Cost-wise, for oil changes are cheap on the Grom. This is something that you can do yourself. You don't have to pay a dealership to do this. The valve clearance check that I had done on this bike, and obviously the fuel pump, that's something that I don't mind having the dealership do, because that's something that it's a little bit more complicated than just an oil change. But for the most part, an oil change or a spinner cleaning on this bike is really straightforward and pretty easy. So in terms of cost of oil, now, oil is a big preference among many Grom riders. A lot of people will say that they like using a full synth, or they like using a semi-synthetic oil, and some people just like using conventional oil. I prefer using the conventional GN4 oil that Honda makes. That's my preferred oil, and that's what I've been running in the Grom. And the main reason for that is that a lot of arguments out there will say that synthetic oils have friction modifiers in there that the Grom doesn't like. You'll find that the clutch will slip, you'll find some other problems, so a lot of people will stick to the conventional oil, or stick with the OEM GN4 oil like I have in here. Now, this oil is dirt cheap. I think for a quart of oil, I think I pay $4.80 something out the door. And so, all you need is 1 quart. What's cool about the Grom, I kind of say it's cool, it's like a curse and a blessing, is the fact that the Grom has a spinner. So instead of a traditional oil filter, you actually don't have a disposable filter. All you have is an oil spinner that essentially flings this oil around the engine. And what you have is you have a little screen right at the bottom of the engine casing there, where any type of dirt or debris or metal shards would go, and they would filter into that little screen. So basically, there's no filter, there's just a screen, a reusable screen that you would clean out, and that would ensure that your oil remains clean. Now, what I was saying is that oil is a very cheap insurance. So a lot of people will change their oil after a couple thousand miles. For me, it's $4. I only clean my spinner every third oil change, every fourth oil change. So what I'll typically do is just change my oil every 500 miles, every 500 to 700 miles, and the oil is rated for 3,000. So it's just cheap insurance. So in terms of cleaning the spinner, the only thing you really have to replace on there is actually going to be the gasket that goes around the cover there. And that's something that some people replace every time, or some people replace every other time. But that whole gasket's really cheap as well. It's a paper gasket. I think it cost me $5 is at my local dealership. So between that and oil, you're looking at about a $10 change if you were to go above and beyond and do a spinner cleaning, replace the gaskets, and then put new oil in. So it's really, really cheap. Man, guys, the Grom is ripping today. I feel like that new fuel pump really added some pep to it or something, because, I mean, this thing's moving. So anyways, in terms of oil, though, you're not going to go bankrupt, guys. I mean, oil's pretty cheap. But another consumable item that you're going to have to replace eventually would be the air filter. That's another really cheap item. You're looking at like $5. The stock air filter is a paper air filter, and a lot of people end up replacing those with holy cotton. A lot of people will be replacing those. Oh my god, that's a lot of cotton. A lot of people will replace those with a cotton air filter. Wow, that really just worked out. So a lot of people do a K&N filter, something that's reusable that they can clean and put back in the bike. That's one other consumable item that's also pretty cheap as well. Now, to be honest though, I mean, I think the most expensive fix I've had on this bike was actually that valve clearance check. I mean, I paid the shop rate, which was $65 for the shop rate, and they replaced my fuel pump under warranty, which was nice. But that was pretty much it. Now, in terms of things I plan on replacing, that would be kind of like a maintenance slash modification is going to be the tires, and that'll be I'd probably say a somewhat expensive fix, because I'm gonna have to buy the tires and then I'm gonna have to pay to get them professionally dismounted and balanced. So to give you guys an idea, a lot of people will end up going with the Michelin Pilot Pure tires, is what most people will go with on the Grom. If you're going for more of like an on-road, off-road bike, a lot of people will go with the Maxxis tires. That's gonna be another big cost. I think the tires themselves are $100, and then for a typical mountain balance, you're probably looking at around, $80 or so. So not super cheap. If I were to probably do it myself, it'd be a lot cheaper. I just don't want to scuff up the wheels because I do not have the tools to dismount any tires. So I guess the next thing on the maintenance list would be the chain and sprocket. So if you guys watched my video where I upgraded my chain and sprocket, you'll know the whole process on how I did everything, and it was pretty straightforward. Now, my sprocket itself, the front sprocket was totally fine. It looked great, but my chain had seen better days. My chain was not properly lubricated at the beginning of its life, and it was pretty bad. I couldn't really save it with all the chain cleaning I did, so that was a big thing. So I ended up having to replace that, and I totally recommend that you replace the stock chain and get something a little bit better. I really love this Renthal gold chain I picked up. It's a lot meatier. It's still a non-O-ring chain, but it looks really cool, and it just it feels a little tighter. It feels a little firmer in comparison to the OEM chain. So the chain and sprocket itself was about $50 shipped, so not super expensive, but like I said, it was definitely a worthwhile mod. Now, to maintain the chain and sprocket and to keep up with cleaning, you are looking at an additional cost. So you're going to be buying some type of chain degreaser and probably some type of chain wax. And like I did in my previous video, if you didn't watch my speed triple video, I show you guys how I clean and lubricate my chain. And I think the degreaser and the wax, I think, are $5 a piece, so $10 total there. So speaking of chain and sprocket, guys, I thought I'd stop and do a couple quick wheelies. Gotta get at least one good one before we move on. There's a good one. Alright, we'll end on that one. So, alright, back to the talk. So we talked about the chain and sprocket. Not a super big expense, but it's something I recommend doing. I'm sure you probably could get a little longer on the stock chain and sprocket than I did if you maintained it from the get-go. So if you just bought your Grom, I definitely recommend lubricating that chain and keeping that thing lubed up, because if you don't, it will rust over and it will get pretty nasty. So I guess one thing that really impresses me about the Groms is out of all the shenanigans and of all the wheelie practice and stuff I've done on these things, I have yet to blow a fork seal. And I thought that would be a more common, I guess a more common thing. I mean, I'm a 200 and something pound guy popping wheelies on this thing, and not every time I come down is the easiest thing. So I would have assumed that either forks would have started leaking or something by now, but it really is just amazing how much of a beating these things can take without any issues like that. And I know other guys too that have practiced wheelies forever and they had some really hard come downs, or guys that have jumped their Groms and have yet to blow a fork seal. And that's something I would have expected by now, but it hasn't happened yet. So pretty cool. Oh yeah, we're moving. This is a good day. We're gonna hit 60. Oh, we hit 60. Oh yeah, it's a good day. Full tuck. There's 62, baby. All right, we'll come down. Gosh, guys, I feel like I'm kind of running out of things to talk about in terms of, you know, repairs and maintenance, because this bike hasn't really had a whole lot. I mean, if I'm being honest and kind of looking at it from like a third person perspective, I have spent so much more in modifications than I have in actual maintenance costs on this bike, which is kind of sad. I mean, I've spent loads more in terms of mods. I think that's probably how it's going to be for most of you. And like I said, I prefaced this whole thing with saying that it's 125cc Honda. There's not going to be a ton you have to do, but there is important things. And I guess like the biggest takeaway from this is really going to be oil changes, spinner cleanings if you don't modify the clutch cover. I mean, putting gas in it, that's pretty important. And then keeping your chain lubed. I can't really think of a whole lot else you would need to do. I mean, electrical wise, the only thing I had happen once was that my LED license plate, I had an exposed wire underneath the tank that was hitting a piece of metal that was blowing out a fuse, and I spent another $5, I think, in a fuse or something like that. But yeah, guys, wow, this is a really cheap bike to own in terms of maintenance and repairs. I think insurance, that's one thing that I mentioned in the 1-year review of the Honda Grom, and insurance is really going to depend on your driving record, how old you are, and all of that, so I can't really calculate that into the experience. I just kind of wanted to wrap up what it costs to maintain the bike and things that you have to do to the bike to keep it running, and everything is pretty cheap. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to calculate everything I've spent on this Grom in the past year and a half I've owned it, and put the grand total right here. Wow, yeah. I don't want to talk about the money I've spent in mods in comparison to that price. That's pretty sad. That's pretty sad, guys. Well, anyways, I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys maybe learned something. Hopefully this helps some of you that are looking to buy a Grom or maybe own a Grom and are just looking at future expenses that you may have. But if you guys like this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up. You can subscribe for more videos in the future. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. This is ALLDAYANTHONY. Peace.